The worst thing that people do that I see is they either do some type of online program they bought for $19 that tells them to get a list, and they send out mailers and they send out letters to people, or they send emails, or just try to cold call people. And there's nothing better than pressing the flesh. I think NAFTA is the logical solution to it. Um, will there be people who are willing to accept the reimbursement rates that are current? Yes. When you go in after those, you realize that those are the guys that just had a toolbox in a truck. They had no idea what a multimeter is. They had no idea what the testing protocol is because they've never been trained by a manufacturer, and it devolves into a bigger and bigger mess over time.
All right.
All
All
right.
right. Good morning, Clark. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you
Sure
for
thing.
joining. We're happy to see that your involvement and your encouragement of NAFTA, by the way.
Well,
Um,
it's been needed for a long time. I think we all know that.
yeah, yeah. And I believe, was it you that told me this maybe back in at HFA last year, where this had been tried in the past, but it didn't
That's
take off?
correct. Yeah, it had a few, especially with the dawn of technology, there were a few like email strings and things like that that had been tried. And before that, I knew there was some guys that had got together and tried to start groups. But when you don't have the technology to
Mhm.
do it, you don't want to pair up with your competitor next door and improve his business. But if you're in Phoenix and another guy's in New York City, then he doesn't feel that competitive pressure to keep a few things under the rug, so to speak. So
And I'll presume this was an attempt pre-video calls. So,
absolutely, yeah,
um, and what was the first version was Skype for the most part. First commercial version. Skype was really hard at first to operate. It was
that's
very
right.
cumbersome. I did not like it at all. Um,
Hmm.
then Zoom came along.
Hmm.
And I like Zoom over the other platforms. I don't
Hmm.
like Google Meets. I don't like Teams too much. Everybody has their own, but for me, Zoom is just simple and straightforward and whatnot. So, well, cool. Well, thank you for joining me. So let me give you, let's give our customers a little bit of background, just in case they don't know specifically who you are.
Sure.
Um, so, you're a kid from Memphis.
Sure.
Um, you went to the University of Memphis.
That's right.
Strangely enough, and I did not know this about you, you also ended up in seminary school.
That's right. Yeah, I went to Memphis. I was actually played on the team, and unfortunately, we lost last night. But so I was a starter for 2 years, and then I got hurt in the weight room
But
after my
on the
second
team, we're
season.
talking football.
Yeah, football team.
Okay.
Yep. And I was starting center for 2 years, and then started I think 23 games, and then was hurt after the second full season of starting. So it was my third season. I was redshirted my first year. And then, so I had to decide what to do with my life because that injury, it was a two-level disc herniation. So it took me
Ooh.
out of playing football forever. At least my doctor gave me some good advice. He had played football at Virginia. He was a linebacker. And he said, if you don't want to be in a wheelchair in your 40s, he said, you need to stop playing football. So I took his advice, and then I had to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. And went ahead and finished up my degree and got an MBA after that. And then started just in the regular workforce like everybody else. So I was working for a small fitness retailer in Memphis, and then moved from there to work for Nordic Track. And then I was offered a job with Spirit Fitness and rolled around through several roles and eventually became their service manager and completed my time at Spirit um, in that role. And then I left to go to seminary. And when I started seminary, I was trying to figure out a job because you need money. Because at that point, we had a kid and had a wife and had a house and all that. Now, my wife was an attorney, so that helped. So she was doing her attorney job, and but I was trying to figure out a way to earn extra money, and so I was like, well, some of the guys out there that I'd been talking to regularly were making pretty good money being a service company, and so we started up a service company. My brother and I did in 1998, and quickly figured out that I needed some help because I was in seminary full time. My brother was in graduate school full time, and we were both working in addition to that. And so the job came up to do what I already knew, and so started the service company up. Needed some extra help in terms of like scheduling and answering simple questions and things like that. So I just stuck up a web page. It was new at the time, so
Mhm.
but
And what
we
year are we
stuck
talking
up a way.
at this point?
This was '98,
Okay.
and so
And
we put up
let
a
me let me sort of stop you there real quick before you get any further.
sure.
Uh, are you still in Memphis at this point? Because I know you
Yes,
live in Mississippi now, correct?
that's correct. It's a
Okay.
suburb of Memphis. Yeah.
Okay.
In
Okay.
fact, my house is about, I can get in 2 minutes to the state line. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Okay. All right. I did not look at actually what city. I just knew it was Mississippi. I didn't look at where you were. So that makes
yeah,
sense. Okay. All
yeah,
right.
it's Olive Branch, Mississippi, but that's, the
Mhm.
state line divides Olive Branch and Memphis.
Okay. And so Memphis literally touches the state line,
That's right.
essentially. Okay. I don't know my geography, if anyone.
It's, Tennessee is
That
huge.
that
So,
was that was not a part of my interest in school. If you were ever curious, that's me, right? So okay, so yeah, and I take it you move over to Mississippi because as soon as you cross the state line to a small town, it's easier to live, essentially, and it's quiet.
well, we actually moved because my oldest son has special needs.
Okay.
And the Memphis City schools were already headed down at that point. He
Hmm.
was in a Memphis City school. He wasn't making progress, and so we hired a what's called a facilitator. She was a master's student in special needs at Auburn, and she came in and went to school with my oldest son one day, and her report was quick and straight to the point. You need to get him out of that school.
Hmm.
So we started looking in the suburbs because the suburbs had much better school systems, and we decided on Olive Branch. So
Okay. All right.
that's how we
And
ended up there.
and your wife is Kelly, and you've been
That's
married
correct.
since 93?
That's correct.
Wow. So you got married young.
Got married at 25.
Okay. Well, okay. I was there with you. Okay. All right. Good deal. And then you're still married today, right? So
That's correct.
she still likes you, huh?
She puts up with me.
There is a point in time where that line gets skewed, right?
That's right.
It's
We
like
got.
we've been doing this too long to get a new model. I already know this one's problems. Yeah, yeah. That's what my
No,
wife
we get
tells me.
along well, and right now the focus is all on the kids because we've got an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old, and we're trying to get them out of high school and get them on and get them successfully started in life. So
And that is its own task from
that's
someone
right.
who has had multiple kids in their lives
Yes,
and stuff. So, okay. All right. So we're at 98. We've started, Treadmill Doctor officially starts.
that's right.
And it starts simply because you're in seminary school. You got to eat. Seminary school takes a fair amount of time, so you need to work on your own schedule.
Yes.
Your brother has joined you. Um, what was that like starting a business essentially with your brother? Do you guys fight like brothers, or are you the brothers that have always gotten along?
Well, in our family, there were four brothers.
Okay.
So the two older brothers kind of were buddies, and the two younger brothers were kind of buddies. And so I was the third out of four, and John was the youngest. So
Oh, okay.
um, we were buddies growing up. Of course, we fought, like all kids do. But we got along pretty well. That was our team, was John and I. So
Hmm.
we we got along relatively well. Every now and then we would have a knockdown drag out, but
Yeah.
if you've got the right partner, it really helps. And he's very good in math and statistics and things like that. He spent a summer taking advanced statistics at the University of Michigan, so he had quite the background that comes in handy in business.
Yeah. And so were you the mechanical one?
I'm the mechanical one. Um, like I said, I've got kind of varied interest, and so I still to this day enjoyed reading all kinds of things. But it's I've got more of the creativity side of things, and that's what helped us with building Treadmill Doctor up.
Yeah, yeah. It's good to have a dreamer and then have someone who is a little bit more grounded in systems.
That's correct.
It's a good duo. Okay. So we're 98, you get going, you've worked, you'd already had a job at working for Nordic Track.
That's correct.
Um, was Nordic Track considered Icon at this point in time or no?
No, this
Okay.
was pre-Icon.
Okay.
This
All
was
right.
when they were owned by CMA,
Okay.
and CMA was essentially Nordic Track, but there were a couple other divisions to the company. And the more I worked at Nordic Track, the more I realized that they were headed down a perilous path. And that ended up after I left. I think it was 2 years after I left. They ended up filing for bankruptcy, and that's where Icon acquired them.
Now, is this I remember having the Nordic Track ski, right?
That was
Is this still the only product at that point in time?
No, we had the skiers, we had recumbent bikes, we had the walk fit manual treadmill.
Okay.
Um, I'm trying to think. I believe they also had the Nordic Flex, which was their weight machine
Okay.
attempt. Um, and so there was a pretty rounded set of products there for them to offer.
Okay. All right. And then you end up over at Spirit. Um, I don't know a lot about Spirit, truthfully. They've
Hmm.
never been high on my radar. So they've been around them for a while. Did not know that.
Yeah, they started in the early 80s, and they started originally as a manufacturer of other types of equipment, but they got into fitness equipment starting about, I think, 1984. And then they started originally with, if I'm not mistaken, they started with treadmills and then broadened that spectrum out as they went over time. They eventually got into steppers. When I was there, we made treadmills, steppers, and weight machines.
Okay. Okay. So as you're starting Treadmill Doctor, in an industry where you don't have any real beacon to look to, right?
That's
Um,
correct.
how do you because you're doing okay, let's back up. You're doing exactly what most of us in the industry end up doing. We're service technicians who become business owners. And so
That's
we
correct.
are good at being the tech. We have to learn to operate a business, which is a completely different animal.
That's right.
But you're at a time in life where this is actually still an emerging industry. So I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe you'll remember this conversation, and I think I said this again to you at HFA last year.
Hmm.
My understanding, if I'm looking back at the history of what we do, um, while there was equipment earlier on, it was more scientific, whatever. And so most likely the people doing repairs are going to come from the factory themselves, from someone specific themselves, specifically trained. But probably in the 80s or early 90s is where you start getting enough equipment that's unique enough out in the space that you start getting independent service providers.
That's
So,
right.
with that style of thought, how do you navigate growth at the late 90s, early 2000s without sinking? How do you find your
Um,
customer? How do you what were you doing?
well, I was fortunate that my undergrad was in finance, and then my master's, my MBA was also in finance and managerial accounting. So I had kind of a background for the business side of things. And immediately out of school, I actually went to work for Merrill Lynch. So I had a finance background to start with and decided I did not want to be in finance after working with Merrill for about a year. And so that's when I pivoted back to fitness because that's what I had done in college. I'd worked for the small fitness store for summers and for the holiday seasons and things like that when I wasn't playing football. So um, it was just what I knew at the time. And I also knew that there was an opening when I went back to seminary. I knew there was an opening for a independent service provider because I had seen that, I guess, proven in some of the larger markets. Memphis didn't have an ISP at the time, and all we had were the fitness stores. And so there were three different fitness stores in Memphis at the time. And when we launched off, we were the first ISP. And so I knew that the fitness stores primarily focused, we had one store that focused on the vertical market. We had one store that was focused on consumers. And then we had one that was consumer only. And so I knew that there was a need for an ISP because either the store didn't have a technician that was really highly capable because I knew all the technicians in the area, or in many cases, they didn't want to work on it if they didn't sell it. And so a lot of product was already starting to be moved through the internet channels. That was the early days of Smooth Fitness. And there was a lot of cross-selling from dealers out of their market and things like that. And so, like if the local True dealer didn't want to service something that was sold into his territory, then True would call me up and have me go service the equipment. And so we had a big True dealer here. We had a big Precor dealer here. And in a lot of cases, that's where I picked up business. But I also knew to do preventing maintenance schedules and things like that because that's what I tried to get started at the place that I had worked. And so that's how I went and sold it at first to apartment houses mainly, some hotels and things like that. And so I got me a base with doing preventing maintenance and then was able to add the consumer business on top of that. And then I helped fill in with some of the store's needs. If their tech couldn't help it or couldn't solve the problem, they would call me in and I would solve that problem for them. So I had a pretty good base of business. It kept John and me both busy early. And so probably by 99, yeah, it was 99, we had to hire another service tech. And it was a fella that's still with us today, Ryan Donnelly. And so he's worked with us for 26 years now.
Wow, that's a long time. That's
Yeah.
a very long time. That's good. So at the beginning of your years, how do you start determining your systems and processes for preventive maintenance and what you're going to do? Because you don't have any. Who do you rely on? Do you just rely on the knowledge that you got from working for Nordic Track and Spirit, or was there things that you were seeing were fundamentally wrong from what you were taught that you knew you wanted to correct?
I don't think it was as much correcting as it was copying. I knew several ISPs that were in major markets, say in Michigan, especially there was a fella in Michigan, there was a fella in New York City, and there was a fella in Boston that I contacted. And, I just had them at the time. On a phone call, I would just jot down, "Hey, what do you do?" And just copied what they did. And it was really good. You go in and you give them a really good price to do a quarterly maintenance schedule. And they told me, they said, every time you go, you're going to find something else wrong. And that's never failed. So you get your foot in the door by giving them a really good price to go in and just do the simple maintenance. But every time you go in, you're going to find something else that's wrong with the machine or something that could be dangerous or something that they need to address now before it becomes a big problem. And that really got me started that way, just by copying others.
And at that time, what was your method of acquiring a new customer? Was it door
It
knocking?
Yeah, it was simply if I was out on a job to an existing customer and I went to a say an apartment house, a lot of times those congregate in clusters,
Hmm.
and I would just stop in after I was finished with my first customer. I would stop in and say, hand them a business card and say, "Hey, I'm Clark from Treadmill Doctor, and here's what I can do for you. And if you want today, I'll go in and I'll just look over everything for you for free." And I rarely was turned down when I offered a free evaluation. I'd give them a list and then I'd walk out, and, a week or two later, they'd get it approved and I'd come back and do a
Hmm.
scheduled maintenance for them. And then we'd start them on a contract.
Yeah. And I still think that that works today.
It does.
There's a term in sales industry, like pest control and other places use it, lawn care uses it. It's called clover leafing. And so if you're standing at, whatever location and you go two doors to the left, two doors to the right, and the five across the street.
That's right.
And those because those are usually the neighbors that will talk to each other if they're talking or they're
That's
paying
correct.
attention.
Yeah.
Um,
And then as you're going by, you'll pass some people that you already know, and you stick your head in the door to the fitness store and say, "Hey guys, how's it going?" And just get an update on their business. And truly, I was interested in what everybody was doing. And they would tell me different things. And so's building an apartment over here, and we're going to sell them the fitness equipment. And so I knew that I'd put it down on a schedule that I need to visit that place after about 6 months, and
mhm.
I'd stick my head in the door, and before you know it, I had another customer.
It's good, and it still would work today.
That's right.
It's networking, networking, networking. That's all there
That's
is.
all it is.
Relation.
Yeah,
This is a business of relationships.
that's all it is.
It's
Yeah,
who you know and how friendly you are with them, and that pays dividends. So yeah, whoever's listening to this needs to take that as it worked in 99 and it's going to work in 2025 and 2026 and 2030.
yeah. The worst thing that people do that I see is they either do some type of online program they bought for $19 that tells them to get a list, and they send out mailers and they send out letters to people, or they send emails, or just try to cold call people. And there's nothing better than pressing the flesh. So
Yeah.
if you go in there in person and you shake hands with someone and you give them a business card, and one thing we ended up coming up with through Ryan's help was we actually gave them a $100 coupon, and
Oh.
it said $100 off your first service. And it was amazing how few of those were not used over time. And they would keep it, and sometimes it'd be 3 or 6 months, but they'd have a need, and they're like, "Well, I get $100 off if I use them."
Hmm.
And then before you know it, you got a regular customer again.
And your customer is all about the budget.
That's right.
And they really are. And that's the interesting part too. That's a good lesson because you can, if you're working from a place of scarcity, then you think that you're losing something there. If
That's
you're
correct.
working from a place of abundance, you realize that you're gaining an opportunity.
Well, I think one thing people forget is once you get a customer, there is a lifetime value to a customer.
Exactly.
If you have a consumer, they may only need you once every 5 years. So you don't give the consumer $100 coupon, because at best case, you might see them twice more. But
Yes.
if you are going to a business that is like a hotel that's going to have a guest on it every single day, and then the kids are going to get in there and they're going to vandalize the equipment sometimes, and sometimes they're going to run the belt off to the side, or the cable's going to get off the pulley, and then the people just don't care and they just keep using it. And before you know it, if you get those regular customers, you can be in that spot, 4 times a year for your preventing maintenance, but you'll also be in there when they have problems that come up just from misuse or what have you. And that lifetime value of that customer can be incredible if you will just stay on top of your customers and provide them a good service. And then that $100 coupon means nothing to the lifetime value of that customer, because you'll build them out thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars over the years. And it's the base of your business. It's always how you treat the customer. You got to be customer first. You got to give them a good value. And then you have to remember that it's not just this repair, it's the next repair and the next repair and the next repair, and the next PM, the next service that you have to do for them. And you just need to look for opportunities to sell to the existing customers that you have. You want to sell more to them. And so that's when we started providing supplies and things like that. So gym wipes, you have to think about ancillary things that you can add to that mix. We added mats early on. We added water bottle holders. At that time, people weren't putting them on the machines. So you could just strap on a water bottle holder and make a little upsell on that, and it would increase your ticket. So people don't think about average order value. They don't think about lifetime value. They don't think about your cost of acquisition. And those things you've got to keep in mind when you're running a business. It's a little different from being just a tech, because as you pointed out, not only are you a service technician, you're a business owner too.
So yeah, and so one of the things too that I would also add to exactly what you're talking about, and those are great. You got to think about the little things, lifetime value. Right? A lot of especially younger companies don't think about lifetime value. Uh, but one of the things that I would press to add to that equation is, and it's one of the things you didn't say, and you didn't say it because it doesn't work. You don't lower your price to get a customer. You add
Yeah,
value to get the
that's
customer.
right.
Right?
That's
You
right.
can give them a upfront discount. You can provide a coupon, but you never lower the price.
That's
That
correct.
devalues you over time in the eyes of the customer.
Well, many people get into the pricing game, and we've had competitors that have done that over the years. And I had one apartment community. The manager called me, and she said, "I have a fella here that's telling me that he can do the preventive maintenance for $60 a visit." And she said, "Can you match that?" And I said, "No, I cannot match $60." I said, "It costs me more than that just to have my overhead and my tools and everything else that I need." And but I said, "You're probably going to get what you pay for." And 6 months later, after she had signed a contract, she had to fire him, and then turned around and, realized that, yeah, this guy out here provides a $60 service, but that's exactly what he provides, is a $60 service.
Yeah. And it's key that you don't get upset with that customer. It's just that you leave the door open for the
That's
customer to come
right.
in.
Just call me once he messes stuff up, and you know when you go in after those, you realize that those are the guys that just had a toolbox in a truck. They had no idea what a multimeter is. They had no idea what the testing protocol is, because they've never been trained by a manufacturer. And it devolves into a bigger and bigger mess over time.
Yeah. So at in these early years, how was warranty work given out and assigned to the different ISPs? Because there's so few of you,
That's
and at the
right.
same time, um, we're only at the beginning of the PC really being available.
Mhm.
And I guarantee you that our manufacturers are not online in any way, shape, or form.
No.
Um, was it fax? Was it phone call? What? How did this happen?
Yeah, it was fax and phone call. Very few people, very few companies were giving us, as you pointed out, any kind of electronic communication. If it was fax. And so that was another way to prospect businesses, just to remind the service managers at the various companies that I was here.
Hmm.
And so I would have a regular call schedule for those guys. And then you go in for your repeat training, or recertification, or what have you, and that would give you the opportunity to talk to those guys once again in person, and once again the press the flesh. It was amazing once you went in for recertification how many times that you would start getting a roll of warranty work. The problem with the warranty work was, that I see over time, is, the rates haven't caught up with reality. And so many times back in those days, I was working for about the same amount that they reimburse today. And so that's a huge issue I see in the industry is if you're paying paid in 2005, what's being paid in 2025, there's no way in the world that you can do that work. And so we only do work now for warranty. We still have a location in Memphis. Ryan heads up our local service operations. So we still have a location in Memphis and we have a location in Nashville, but we only do warranty work when they have no other option. And when it is that, it's a negotiated price. And so we don't do warranty work for regular reimbursement rates.
So I hear, and I've talked about it with John Isaacs, and I've had
Mhm.
communications with Jamie, who's coming over with Pulse Fitness. And everyone is saying that over in Europe that their rates are high, that they're getting paid, right? And so what do we need to do? Because this is obviously this is one of the biggest bones of contention that we can have right now, right?
Yes,
Because we are all trying to operate in an economy that has been flooded with cash from our government, which has then watered down our buying power. And at
that's
the
right.
same time, too, we're being paid the same rates. And okay, so I'm young in this industry compared to you. I started in 2011. All right.
Uh-huh.
But I'm still more or less getting paid very much the same rate that I did since 2011 with some incremental raises. They're small, but they are nowhere near what the economy has done.
Mhm.
What are your suggestions, at least the first or second mechanism that needs to get pulled to change that tide to get it moving in the opposite direction?
Well, I think NAFTA is the logical solution to it. Um, will there be people who are willing to accept the reimbursement rates that are current? Yes. And the reason that they're staying where they are is because there's supply. It's a simple supply and demand equation. And so if the better technicians out there reach a point where they're willing to accept a little bit of pain on the front end, but then band together, and that's where NAFTA really comes in. If they're willing to band together and say, we're just not going to accept those rates. We do some service for an outside company. And I won't name the company because I don't think that, and they're not in the fitness industry. They're in a related industry to that. But when we do reimbursements for that, they only call us if they need us. But if they need us, our reimbursement rates to the ISPs about $180 a call. And so we just let them know this is all we're willing to accept. And if you're willing to pay, then we will send a technician out. And since we have a lot of ISPs who deal with us on a regular basis, we met out those calls to the groups that buy from us regularly.
Hmm. Good. It's good to hear. I personally believe, and let me get your thought on this. I think the first thing that we can do in a relationship with manufacturing when it comes to warranty work is the commercial manufacturer should automatically pay out the first hour plus its travel to start with.
That's correct.
Automatically. That should not be nickel and dime in 15-minute increments.
Yes.
By doing so, you're automatically putting in, okay, let's back this up. If I do a 15-minute call and I have a 30-minute travel, so I get my travel and I do 15 minutes and then my travel back to the same point of beginning. I got an hour and 15 minutes worth of work that got done. Um, but you're only going to pay me for the 15 minutes of work. So therefore I'm making somewhere in the 50s and 60s dollars for that whole hour and 15 minutes. And in today's economy, that does not keep a viable anything bigger than a mom and pop who
That's
is
correct.
literally the husband and somebody in a family member in the office. um, working.
And
Uh,
it's a slave labor situation. You'll
it,
never be able to grow. You'll never be able to build any kind of systems. You won't be able to even prepare yourself for retirement. People think about
Mhm.
a job and then they don't think about the future in addition to that. And so I hear people complain, from time to time that, hey, you're charging too much for this. And I'm like, well, we have insurance costs. We have, matching unemployment taxes. We have workers' compensation that has to be paid. And all of those are fixed expenses that have to be averaged out over all of the sales of the company. And so then if you have a location, a business location, if you have vehicles, all of those have to be considered when you set your rates. And so we, you know, today, if I accepted a 65 or $70 payment for warranty work, it just wouldn't work. You can't do it, not with the overhead that you have.
Yeah.
And then if you consider the future and say, okay, I've got to think about my retirement as well, and I've got to put a little bit back for that from every job, then you start running out of you start running out of money real quick.
Yeah. I completely agree. Uh, there, there is an opportunity for our industry as a whole to be healthier and to reduce the overhead cost of our manufacturers if they will understand that investment into us and even their own service techs, but into us as an industry, we will reduce their expenditures on unused parts, shipping, obviously, um, their need or constant turnover for their own in-house call center service, tech support. That is why we are seeing tech support go overseas. They're trying to
That's right.
reduce that cost because it is a financial burden. It is a drag. It is an anchor outside of their ship that gets tossed, and they're often undertrained now,
That's
even more
correct.
so. I completely agree with you on those statements there. And
And I think most manufacturers, if they had their druthers, and it doesn't include all of them, but a good number of them out there would prefer just to make a product, ship a product, and then never have to deal with it.
yes, yes.
And
So
you really get that on the low end of the market.
so then if we go back and so now if we use this as the endpoint, right? How do we get to a point and let's work towards that? How about that? Let's see if we can build a timeline here in your experience and then what I'm seeing on my end of things. All right. So if we can get to the point where quote unquote NAFTA or our colleagues elsewhere, yourself or somebody else builds the capacity to remove training and the vast majority of tech support being removed out of manufacturing so they can focus on just being really good at what they do. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If we go back to the beginning when you first started, what was there things that were better that were being done at that point in time to help you be more successful than what we see now?
Yeah, absolutely. The training was much better at that time, and all of the call centers, I can't think of a single one, were all U.S. based. They typically were people who had formerly been a technician. And so several of the people that I've kind of grown up with in this industry, so to speak, the technicians that started under them, I know several people that are retired now, and we'll talk from time to time, and they'll tell me, "Oh yeah, the head of pre-course service was a guy I trained years ago, or the head of life fitness service was a technician for me," and so the quality at the top, I think, is still there. But as you pointed out, as people are feeling financial pressures, they're trying to reduce expenses and they're doing it in such a way that really hurts the underlying business because things aren't as technically proficient. they kind of shotgun the parts approach, especially as you go lower in the value chain. And so, if you've got $1,000 treadmill, many times the factory will just send out everything it could possibly be, and then because they don't want to hear back from the customer, and it's a waste of time, resources, and freight. And as you know, freight has gotten to be a huge cost in the industry over time because we've got a duopoly in the freight business.
Hmm. Okay. So I personally have felt like in my period that I've watched our industry go in peaks and valleys.
Hmm.
Currently, we feel like we're in an extremely deep valley.
That's correct.
Understandably, again, because our economy is washed with way too much cash pumped in. And so buying power has changed. We are in an interesting situation of different Cold War fronts affecting us as well. And hopefully not becoming a kinetic war front anytime
Hopefully.
soon. Um, how, how do we as an industry, in your eyes, navigate out of this deep valley and get everybody to the table to communicate and start working together versus individually, and understand that if we have open door communications and we listen to different strategies and thoughts, that we could maybe come out stronger.
Well, that gets back to a real deep problem. It goes back to my seminary experience
Okay,
because
we'll
you're
take
talking
it.
about personal psychology there.
Yeah.
And so our innate thoughts are self-preservation above everything else.
Hmm.
And so there's the natural tendency to kind of retreat to our own protection when things are tougher or when things are going bad. And those are the exact times that we need to be reaching out. And it's it's how do you psychologically move a person from a um, a mindset of being insular and inward focused and thinking in terms of a lack of things and thinking and changing that term to an abundance mentality and knowing that there is enough business for everybody. That's clearly the case because we're in a mature industry now. And so it really gets down to personal psychology as a group of ISPs. Now, how that's all navigated is it's going to be extremely tricky because that self preservation pops its head up, um, especially when times are tough. And that was one of the things that was something that we had to overcome recently with our merger with Fitness Repair Parts is we're in a tougher consumer segment, in our business, a little bit different from the ISP business, but it's very much similar. And so we had to overcome that and realize that we're better together than we are apart.
Hmm. How did that? So I want to come back to that for sure because that's a big deal.
Yeah.
For sure. I definitely want to come back to that. So before we get to your merger and whatnot, and let's maybe hopefully if we have pull a different couple, three different threads, we end up back at a final point, right? Um, let's go back to um, beginning to sell parts outside
Mm-hmm.
of just being an ISP. What what were the mechanisms that were happening? What were the thought processes, the triggers that got pulled that had you start selling parts? And then what were the first things that you did sell?
Well, we started off in, like I said, in '98. So we threw up a web page the year that Google started, and we really it was a singularity event more than anything else because we were one of the few people who were online. And so we originally put the web page up, but how people came to us is they were shopping for a treadmill. And we realized that immediately. And so John did more of the programming than I did at the time. We used template sites and things like that to get started. And he would be spending most of his time. I would do more of the work. Ryan would supplement that. And then John did a lot of the programming on the website. And so the immediate demand was for people who were looking for advice to buy a treadmill. And so that's what we did. We went to the show. You remember well, you may not. It's starting in 2011. There was a big show every year in Atlanta called the Super Show. Mm-hmm. And it was not just fitness, but it was all sporting goods. And so it was the Georgia World Congress Center. Eventually, once they built the Georgia Dome, it bled over into that. So it was a monster show. And all of the companies went there. And so we were able to go around the show, look at the insides of everything. And that's how we started doing reviews of treadmills back then. And we put up a real simple review section on the website just to start with with that process to try to reduce phone calls and things like that, because our phone number was clearly stated on the website. So I'd be on a job and I get a phone call and somebody's wanting to talk about buying a new treadmill. And I had to say, wait a second, there's an email address also. Email it and I'll get to you when I can. And, I'll provide you some personalized advice on it. But having that material on the website moved us to the top of the search results, because if there was another ISP, which were a couple other ISPs that had web pages at the time, it made us more of a national draw than it did just a local Memphis draw.
Okay, so you start doing reviews. You're trying not to you're trying to guide your customer base into buying the right product for themselves.
A more quality product, yeah. Because Sears was big at that time. Sears sold more fitness equipment than anybody.
Yeah.
And they were selling Westlows and Proforms, and they eventually were selling Nordic Tracks. And they were pushing a lot of product that was just junk at the time to the consumer. And yeah, that provided us with the product. But, I've always kept the mindset that if you do the best thing for the customer, then that customer is going to have the best result. And as a result of that, they're going to become a lifetime customer of your business. And so we didn't even put products up on the website until I believe it was December or January of 99. And we actually started by thinking in terms of the review side of things. And so we originally put out some of the ancillary items like mats and things like that water bottle holders, things for people who just bought a new treadmill and maybe a maintenance kit, that sort of thing. And those started selling almost immediately. And then we would get requests come in over email for quotes on parts. And so we started putting up just a few parts at the first, and those started selling. And so we realized, wait a second, we got something here, we think. And so we started buying parts from the different manufacturers. And before you knew it, we had a full catalog.
What did the manufacturers think of that at the time? Were you the first at that point? Was there anybody else doing it?
I was not aware of anybody else doing that at the time, but that we really had a catalog blown out by probably 2001 or 2002. And we essentially proved the market. And then a lot of people came in and copied after that.
Okay.
But
how did the manufacturers feel?
The manufacturers, especially Icon at the time, I think they appreciated the fact that we were there because it helped reduce costs to the call center. And so their viewpoint was, wait a second, we've got this group over here that's taking phone calls or load off of us, especially in the busy season, and we're able to move some of that work over there. So we'll give them a pretty good discount so they can sell parts profitably. And so that's really how that got started. And so we made trips out to Logan and talked with the people. They actually visited us in Memphis and ended up meeting with them. They were actually, we found out later, once several people had moved on from Icon that we kept in touch with, that they were thinking about buying us at that point. But they were in a tough financial spot, so they didn't think they could come up with the money to buy us.
Were you interested in selling at that time?
As I tell everybody who asks me, everything I have is for sale except my family and my dog. So you come up with the right price and it's yours.
Yeah, I hear
I'll
you.
figure out something else to do.
And sometimes the dog and the wife are the most valuable things. The kids are, depending on the day.
Well, I've had times where my dogs got nervous. So
Yeah, yeah, I understand that. Um, so in your parts, you've ventured into selling your own brands as well, right? Um,
that's correct.
so what was that experience like? How did that happen?
Well, that got to the creativity side of things. Early on, we realized that they were using, especially Icon was using a lot of common sizes across models,
Hmm.
and they would put different part numbers on them, but they were the same part. And so we actually started up by enlisting Mall to help us. And we started getting Icon sizes made by Mall, and then found out from Mall that they used to be an Icon supplier at that point, but then they had gone overseas.
Hmm.
And so they had a lot of the sizes already with the different model numbers, and they were very helpful in helping us build up a supply of aftermarket belts to supply for the Icon machines. And as you know, when Icon originally went to China, and even to this day, sometimes the part quality suffered, and so we were actually putting better, belts on machines at that time than what originally came on the machine. So it gave the customer even a better experience. They were able to buy the belt either at the same cost or in some cases a little cheaper, and they were getting a better quality belt than what was originally on the machine. And so that got the thought process working, and that's where the creativity came in. And we started realizing there were other parts that were commonly used, and started developing parts that could be used in place of the original factory part. And so we started sourcing parts ourselves and contract manufacturing those back as early as, I believe, 2004 or 2005.
And how are you doing that again without the knowledge of the internet, right? How do you go out and find those who are making what you want? I mean, obviously, we're still using phone books, but the phone
That's
book
right.
doesn't tell you about the manufacturing organization 5 states away, much less another country.
Well, that's where you had to where I had to really go back onto some of my training in business. First off, I knew some of the manufacturers from my time at Spirit.
Uh-huh.
I didn't have as much contact with those at Nordic Track because I was just a regional manager for Nordic Track, and I wasn't involved in the service side of things. But at Spirit, I was heavily involved in it. So I knew all the manufacturers that made Spirit's parts for them.
Hmm.
And so, because I had to deal with them on, an everyday basis. And so I'd go to Siegling, and then I figured out that there were other companies out there that made them, like Habitat, and I knew of them all, and I knew of several other companies out there that made different equipment. And then we started attending some of the different shows for those manufacturers, and you found quite a breadth of those. And then we started attending overseas shows, and then you started finding even more manufacturers for them. And so one of our strengths is our manufacturing network runs essentially worldwide now. And we've had things made, all over the world that are brought into the States, and then, branded with our brand and then sold that way.
Gotcha. Interesting. And what kind of shows did you have to go? Like, what were the shows that you found those kinds of manufacturers at?
Well, you could go to FIBO, you could go to TISPO,
So FIBO
Uh,
does more than is manufacture equipment manufacturer plus a full case good treadmill manufacturers as well.
exactly. If you walked around like HFA last year, you would also see component suppliers that decided to show. And so several of the companies that we've dealt with over the years were showing at HFA last year.
Really, I did
And
not
so
notice
yeah,
that, but I wasn't
yeah,
looking for them either.
yeah. But there were motor manufacturers there. There were now our motor manufacturer wasn't showing there, but there were motor manufacturers there. There were electronic subcomponent manufacturers there. You can find a great number of them that way. And so what we ended up doing is working through agents because those agents typically um, know the ground a whole lot better than you do. So we've had one agent that we've worked with in Taichung, Taiwan, for probably over 20 years now, and he has worked as a inspector mainly for the manufacturers up to that point. And then, so he had been in all the various manufacturing facilities for Life Fitness and for Precor and for Daco, who has Spirit and Soul, and for all the other major manufacturers, Cybex, you name them. He's been in all of them, and he knows them on a name basis. And so, in a lot of instances, he can go to them and say, "Hey, I'm trying to get something contract manufactured. Who would you talk to?" And so they will refer them to subassembly manufacturers, and then we can do evaluations of the product from there.
Interesting. Okay, and then you just order in a grouping of them, and
Yeah.
see what you got. Okay.
That's right. You have to bring in the components and run them in durability tests and things like that. And the electronics are probably the most tricky, but mechanical parts, they're real easy because you bring them in, you spec them out the way that you want them built, and then you just durability test them. So we have our own durability testing machines. And I mean, once we have expanded out over the years, I mean, we now have our own manufacturing equipment in some limited sense. We don't manufacture electronics, but we have our own belt and deck manufacturing equipment in house,
Hmm.
and we have other machine works and things like that we can actually make things.
Gotcha. So you're currently like your brand of belt and deck you're actually making in-house these days.
No, we're probably making, I would say probably with decks, we're probably making 80% of our own decks.
Hmm.
We still buy the highest moving decks from our suppliers overseas. And then with belts, it's more of a fill-in thing. We do
Okay.
have belt manufacturing capability, but we got to the point where we were having to air freight in like supplemental orders for belts, and we decided that was getting really expensive, especially with what's happened to shipping rates over the last, I guess, 10 or 15 years. And so we decided it would be cheaper to buy our own equipment. So we went to the manufacturer of the equipment, which our agent helped us find, and then bought our own equipment. So we have our own belt splicing, seaming, cutting machines. We can build a belt from the ground up.
Hmm. So with how has tariffs affected you?
Oh, it's been incredibly impactful. Yeah, I'm not. You'll meet a lot of people in this business who are big Trump fans. I'm not a big Trump fan.
Hmm.
Not necessarily because I disagree with some of the things that he does. I think all presidents have good and bad, but using tariffs as a weapon, contrary to what he says, the other countries don't pay the tariff. Now we have had some of the suppliers reduce prices to help with the tariffs. So in that sense, yes, they're eating a little bit of the tariff, but it's like a shipment we got in just this week, where we have contract manufactured the gas shocks that go on the Bowflex machines.
Okay.
Um, those have aluminum and steel in them. And so we bought the actual shocks, but it had a 200% tariff on it since it had aluminum and steel in it. So it tripled our cost of the product itself plus the freight coming over. And so we have to raise prices. And so it's the consumer who gets hurt.
Yeah, and I guess the issue is for us as an industry, most of our manufacturing of our parts, even our belts, as you said, Habit and Siegling and stuff, even though they have offices here, I don't, they're not manufacturing here, are they?
There's not a single belt that the core belt itself, the
Yeah.
weaving
Yeah.
and applying the top coat, there's not a single belt made in the US anymore.
Are they bringing them over here and joining them, cutting them and joining them here at least?
Very little anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, Mall's probably the number one supplier of treadmill belts that are
Still here.
actually seamed and joined here.
Gotcha. Okay. Man, that does cause problems. And I guess every
Yeah,
day you're just trying to figure out what's next.
that's right. That's right. And you have to navigate that, and it makes it a little more complicated. We've had shipments where we've held until the country's got a new deal, and then we're able to ship it at a lower tariff rate. But many times you can't wait, and so you have to take that shipment in and pass that extra cost along to the customer.
Got you. Um, is this, I guess this, so you started your conversation with fitness repair parts, Jeremy,
Mhm.
some time ago.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
by the way, he did a really good job of keeping it quiet. Um, you know, tell me about that relationship and how that emerged and whatnot.
Well, we actually spoke with Jeremy about 12 years ago, and my brother is more of our salesman. So he approached when Jeremy's father was still involved in the business, and they gave us a number at the time because at that time we were looking at a straight acquisition, and it was just a crazy number. And so things didn't advance very far at that point, and we just decided the time felt right. And so it's almost 2 years ago now. John approached Jeremy, but as everybody, I guess, naturally feels, when you're talking to a competitor, you want to be as guarded as possible. And at the same time, if you want something to move forward, you do have to reveal things.
Mhm.
And so things went along very slowly because we had to feel each other out first and get to know each other. And so we met multiple times over that course of 2 years. And things just progressed along to the point we felt like we had good alignment with each other, both personally and business wise. And finally decided to pull the trigger this summer. And so everything actually was official October 1st. So this is pretty fresh.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And this officially makes you guys the largest parts retailer. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's good. Congratulations.
Yeah. And there's a lot of
Congratulations.
advantages that we didn't realize. We knew there would be advantages to combining the companies, but we didn't realize the advantage to scale. Um, Very few businesses in the country are 10 million or larger, and that's kind of a magic number. I was listening to a podcast this week where a fellow gave a number, and I haven't researched it to know if this is true, but he said 4/100ths of all businesses ever started in America ever achieve a $10 million top line revenue.
Mhm.
And we're not quite there yet. We're close, but we're not quite there yet combined. But we'll be there shortly, and you gain a lot of the advantages of that scale that are only available to businesses in that once you scale up to that point. And so so far, I mean, the merger has been better than we ever expected.
Good.
Um, the customer lists are quite different. The customer bases are quite different. So it's been very complimentary so far. The product mix has been extremely different. in what we focus on. We focus on volume parts. Jeremy actually said it best. If you think of a treadmill as a car, we provide the tires and maybe the wheels and windshield wipers and oil and filters and things like that. Jeremy provides every part of the car. And
Mhm.
so, with those two combinations, I think it's going to give the company as a whole a lot better ability to service the customer, but it's also going to provide us with the opportunity to start contracting, manufacturing more parts.
One of the interesting things that Jeremy brought to my attention, which I just never would have considered, um, is that the lack of real discount given to individuals such as yourselves for the amount of parts that you're actually buying. Because we all know what we sort of get, right? And
That's
in
right.
conversations with him, learning that even though he's buying, let's just say he's going to go to XYZ manufacturer and he's going to spend $20,000 two times a year or whatever, specifically with them, or whatever it is, and buy in bulk, his discount is either the same, if not, or just a couple of percentile higher. And I'm like, I don't understand this because I do believe that part of NAFTA is also open while, okay, let's back up. NAFTA, while the third party vendors are not specifically who our demographic is or should be, you are a part of us because you're a part of the services side and for your success. And then that turns around and hopefully is for the ISP success that we can, that you get a much better discount. And
You would
then,
think.
yeah, and then you are able to again work better with ISPs. And then if you're working better with ISPs, there's less drag inside of the manufacturing. That is the
Yeah,
goal. And it doesn't have to be a lot, but like if you can come back and, say, look, here, like Jeremy has on his website, and when you spend about this amount, then this becomes your discount and it's a tiered, those tiers aren't very dramatic.
no,
And but in a healthier world, we want to get to be like supply house.
that's right.
That's the goal in
That's the goal.
your community, not my community, your community of parts retailing is not able to act like a parts warehouse, um, like we have in the other trades.
That's correct.
And that's where we sort of envision liking to see this trying to move towards. Yes, I can go buy the part directly from Train in the air conditioning space, or I can go to my local supply house and get it for a good deal,
That's right.
a very good deal, you know,
Mhm.
and it just depends on what I need. So interesting, interesting, interesting.
Yeah,
Well,
they've treated us as ISPs for the entire time that we've been operating. And that's why we made the decision to go outside of their typical supply chain. Um, it was a thing that was forced on us more than anything else.
mhm.
And so anytime we run up against a volume part or anything that we notice could be supplied with a solution that can solve multiple parts or part numbers, we always employ that.
Yeah, understood, understood. All right, so to try to bring all these threads together, we've talked about pay scale has not changed much. Now, privately and whatnot, it has. And we
Yes.
encourage all ISPs to communicate with their colleagues across the nation. And hopefully,
Mhm.
NAFTA, Jeremy really wants to do this, by the way. Jeremy really wants to have mastermind groups of a handful of people that meet monthly across. They're not in each other's markets to talk and to share.
Mhm.
And I encourage the heck out of that, right?
Yeah.
and whatnot. But we encourage our ISPs to really make sure they're not lowballing. Um,
Hmm.
be mindful of accepting lowballing from anybody, whether it's the end user or a manufacturer. We recently turned down Peloton for 50 some odd locations.
Hmm.
Speaking of Peloton, back in the news again.
Yeah.
I, you just have to sigh and go, WTF? I mean, how does this happen continuously?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
That's a whole nother
a whole
conversation.
conversation in itself. And
Yeah.
in Peloton, if you happen to see this, first and foremost, go talk to Precor. Just go talk to Precor. You happen
Please.
to own them. They're in the pocket right here. All
That's
right. Go
right.
talk to Precor and then come talk to us. And by the way, maybe go get your bikes made at Giant. It works for
Maybe.
everybody else.
That's right.
You know, it works for everybody else. Their frames aren't breaking. Their
Yeah.
seat posts aren't breaking. Um, uh,
Rexan's another good one.
where at?
Rexan.
I think actually that's where they're being made.
Oh, really?
I think
Because,
so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure
I
that
think
is what I heard.
Rexan is the one they bought, and then I think they cheapened up the process because Rexan used to make a lot of the Life Fitness bikes,
Uh-huh.
and you never had the same problems
I know that
out
the
of
name was
those.
thrown out in the conversation, but it's been a
Yeah,
while.
yeah,
They could have left, right?
that's
But
possible.
regardless, all right. So, you know, I want your take on a healthy industry. This is the goal that I want.
Hmm.
All right. So we want to talk income. We want to talk growth and how we support each other, relationship in manufacturing and things that need to change, um, and then where Treadmill Doctor slash FRP is in the mix. And by the way, first, before you answer that, is there going to be a name change? We were joking around with Jeremy on how this name could come out, and it came out as garbled if we were to mix them. Um, but is there a name change, or currently right now, will you keep two separate names?
Currently, the plan is to keep two separate names.
Okay.
There's no plan to change the name, and that's because the customer segment for both on the consumer side is quite different. And so FRP is it's got a good mix of consumer business in addition to the ISP business, and Treadmill Doctor is much heavier towards the consumer side. So um, we thought that combining the websites and eliminating the brand name didn't make any sense on the front end. Now we are combining back end, and we're combining a lot of the IT structure and things like that. But and we will be combining warehouses probably here in the next 6 months. But um, at this point, we're going to continue with the FRP site, and we call it the TMD site. So those two will continue to not operate independently, but market independently.
Okay. No, it makes sense. It makes sense. All right. So, first, how, when we're talking about pay scales and stuff, what are your recommendations to the ISP at whatever level? Maybe let's go with smaller, because they're struggling more. But even sometimes your larger organizations are struggling as well.
That's
What
right.
is your recommendation for profitability?
Well, profitability, you have to remember that all of your costs have a certain load to every single transaction that you make. And I think people forget about that and they just think of the variable cost out there. So you have to understand at the end of the year, if you do, say, $100,000 in business, and at the end of the year, you have $50,000 left over to live on, then you need to go back and engineer how you arrived at that $50,000 profit. And so if you take out all your variable costs, so buying the part, paying for the shipping, operating, that one trip if you take those variable costs out, you arrive at your structure cost, what it takes to operate your business on a regular basis. And then if you know that number, it's real easy to price, because then you know that, okay, we call it our load. So if we have a load of 20%, and that's our structure cost, and then we have product cost on top of that of, say, 50 or 60% of the sale, to end up at the number that we want to be profitably wise, we can back engineer that number. And so, yes, it involves a lot of math. Yes, it involves some, but it's all simple math. We're not talking about multivariate equations. We're talking about real simple things. And you have real world experience for those established businesses out there. You're first starting out, you're kind of having to spitball it and guess. But I would start with the new ISP to assume that you're going to have about a 20% overhead. And then from there, that helps you price out your product, which is your service going forward. And so then you know that when I buy this part, I've got a load on that part of at least 20% that I need to add to that in order to be able to just break even at the end of the day because of the load of the business. And so if you are even just a nascent or starting business, understanding the basic rules of business is paramount. Otherwise, you're going to underprice yourself. And so it all comes down to, what do I want to make at the end of the year? And then you can back engineer yourself to that. And I know that's a complicated answer to your question, but that's how we arrive at it when we do budgeting every year. Is, okay, what number do we want to end up at the end of the year? And we do it by percentage. And so if we want to end up with a 6% or an 8% net profit at the end of the year, then we have to back engineer all those costs. And then we have to back engineer the variable cost on top of it. And then that's where problems like tariffs come in, and you have to account for those. And so at the end of the day, you have a profitable business, because if you're not profitable, you're not going to be around. And so in order for you to be here and I'm talking now to the new ISP out there, for you to be around in 20 years, or 15 years, as in Scott's case, you're going to have to run a profitable business. You can't run it at a loss. That doesn't work. And so that's why so many businesses fail in the first 5 years. Over 90% of all U.S. businesses fail in the first 5 years. It's because people don't take that business mentality to it. They take it as, I'm working a job, except now I'm my own boss. And you can't think of it that way. You have to think of it in terms of, I'm running a business. And so any business has a certain load. It may be lower for a new company. And as you grow, you really have to keep control over those costs in order to maintain your profitability. And you have to look at it, we look at it at least on a monthly basis, but in a smaller company, you can afford to look at it on an annual basis. But we do things like projecting out budget versus actual. And so you have to study that on a regular basis and become better at business. And you can go on YouTube and discover all of this stuff. It's really easy to do now that we have, everything in front of us. You have to put some time into building the business. And you have to work on the business in addition to doing the actual work. And it makes it tougher when you're smaller. It was tough for me when we first got started, because I had to do the work, but then I also had to work on the business. And over time, that pays dividends. And that's how companies stick around for 20, 30, 100 years, is because they work on the business first and then they do the actual work.
Yeah. Let's simplify that in a way. Maybe let's replace load with fixed cost.
Okay.
So that way the average person goes, oh yeah, okay. So every single month I got to pay this insurance bill. I have
That's
to
right.
pay this. I got to pay my own. If I'm a single ISP, I have my expenditures to live. So
That's
your
right.
load is also your light bill. It's
That's right.
also, your mortgage, things like that. You got to look at it that way. And then as you
That's
grow,
right.
what are the other things? My car payment,
Yep.
my insurance payment, you'll realize that your vehicle gas bill is actually sort of within the same spot by $100 every single month. So you just
That's right.
take it and go, okay, if it's consistently $400, I'm going to call it $500 every month because that's when I spend a little more, right? And so, yeah, you're completely correct.
And that's
And it,
where a guy like Dave Ramsey comes in. Is if you
yeah,
don't know how to do your household budget, go to Dave Ramsey's website, and I believe he still to this day has it. You can download a budget worksheet. You can go through and figure out what your household budget is, and like you said, you have to put that down and know what each number is in order to be able to operate on a regular basis. Because if you can't live, you can't operate a business.
yeah.
And, I disagree with Dave on some things, but the one thing he has is you need to know where every dollar's going.
Completely understand, and that's perfect. And so that to all the young ISPs and all business owners, that is why pricing appropriately is important. And if anyone in our community ever looks at you and says, "Hey, your prices are too low," it's because they're too low. And at the end of the day, your too low pricing also drags the rest of us
That's right.
because you're undercutting us and we can't do a good job for a low price. And your low price also keeps you from your growth. It might take care of you and your wife, or you and your son, or you and your daughter, whoever that might be, or you and your husband. Um, and But you're not going to grow out of it.
No,
And
you'll never outgrow that. And the problem that comes in there, and we've had plenty of competitors in our local markets over the year come in and price things ridiculously low. And I never worry about them because I know they'll be gone within a year or two, and they always are.
yeah,
Um, and so, as you pointed out, that's why I keep, good relationships with people back when I was doing the work, and now when we have others that do that work, I preach to them. You've got to keep a good relationship with that customer who decided to go with the cheaper route, and explain to them there's a reason that they're cheaper, and we'll be happy to help you out once you discover that what you're getting for that lower price.
understood. Next thing to wrap up on the value of sales.
Mhm.
What sales to me is nothing more than the lifeblood. You have to have it. It is uncomfortable. It is
Yes.
absolutely uncomfortable to walk in and feel vulnerable.
Yeah,
What
and
is
actually, I had a good friend of mine turn me on to this about 2 months ago. I was talking to him because I was studying Dan Kennedy. I don't know if you've ever run
Mhm.
across him, but Dan
Yeah.
kind of considered the father of modern sales. And so, if you want to read some good books, start with Dan Kennedy, and he'll get you all the basics that you need to understand how sales work. But then I moved on, and with the help from my friend, he said, I'm really studying Alex Hormozy.
Mhm.
So if you want to advance to the next level of salesmanship, study Alex Hormozy. I'm deep into his books right now. He's only got 3 books, I believe.
He does.
And I'm deep into those books right now because I'm learning more about sales than I've ever thought. And sales is essentially about, you know, creating a value proposition for your customer. It's giving that customer more than they expect, and it's doing it at a price where you can make a living on it, and at the same time the customer has a good deal. And that's essentially all sales is. But the more value you can provide to that customer, the higher the price you can charge.
Yep. And that goes
And
back to your total lifetime value.
that's right.
Don't
That's right.
cheapen your price, provide value. In providing value, you create total lifetime value from your customer. They keep
Yeah.
coming back and giving you what you need, cash.
Exactly. And I can give you a real life example that we encountered. Every summer we go through and we do an evaluation of every competitor in our field that I'm aware of. And we'll actually buy products from them. And I found out that one of our big competitors had cheapened up their belts. And so I was trying to figure out, I was like, how are they selling a belt for the same price that was sold at 5 or even 7 years ago? And so we bought a belt from them, came in and took the belt apart and studied it. And essentially, they had thinned up the belt. They'd gone with cheaper material to make the belt. And our response to that is we had a belt in development that we're able to actually provide a better belt now. We're not going to cheapen our price. What we're going to do is not increase our price, and we're going to provide a better belt. And so we've actually thickened it up just a hair. And we're going with a better top coat material so it'll have better structural rigidity to it. And if you make a bigger difference in the value that you're providing the customer over the long term, not the short run, but over the long term, you're going to be the winner in the market, in my opinion.
Good stuff to know. And the interesting part, a good comparison to me, and I hate saying the name out loud, but it is what it is. Duramax versus anything else. All my facilities that I walk into that have somehow gotten Duramax put on, they will literally have customers saying, if like, I'll use a YMCA for example. They're
Okay.
buying Duramax from somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
and somebody's putting them on. And they've had a customer walk up to, they're on a Life Fitness. They had some Life Fitness in there, and they had one Life Fitness belt left, and they had members going up and said, "You change that belt right there, and we're leaving."
Really?
Because of the feel, the way, I mean,
Uh,
it's just they're that okay. So if the average commercial belt is 2.3 millimeters
mm-hmm.
and you go down to 1.8 or lower, you're gonna know it's
That's
like
right.
running on the wood.
That's right.
There's that little bit of cushion makes all the difference in the world. And then when you get on a medical belt, which is, I don't know, are they 2.5 or so? The
Some can go as high as 3.3.
okay. And that's a big difference. It's like, oh wow, this is cushiony, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into, like a Woodway style belt, the slat belts. Now that's a
That's
completely
right.
different experience, right?
That's right.
But when you reduce a walk belt below industry average of 2.3, it is noticeable.
Yeah.
Definitely noticeable. All right. Next wrap up question. If you are talking directly to manufacturing, what's your message on how to, because they all have issues right now of their
Yeah.
own degree.
That's right.
Literally every single one. I don't know anyone that's in a great shape, right? Um, uh, what would be your message on how to make us whole, healthy and whole?
Well, I think they need to, as a company, and I know this from my experience at Spirit. Now, I have no experience with the current management of Spirit other than knowing who they are. But Daco, when they bought Spirit in the early 2000s, prior to that, when we were pricing out our product, we looked at all the variable costs to make a treadmill, then we added in our overhead, and that's how we priced it. And they didn't take anything into consideration for servicing that product. That was just part of the general overhead. And I always thought, and I preached at the time, there needs to be some kind of addition into that price in order to service that customer at the end of the day. And our customers at the time were the independent retailers. And I was like, you're going to provide them with a better experience if you build a little bit in. It doesn't have to be a lot, but build a little bit in order to provide that extra level of service. And so I think if the manufacturers, from their standpoint, would take a good hard look at it and try to build in a little bit extra into their pricing structure to accommodate a better service level, that's what's going to separate them from the pack. Because right now, the problem is, yes, they're building a better quality machine, But people are looking at it like I can go to Sam's Club or Costco and I can buy me a treadmill for $7.99 or $1,000. Why would I go out and spend 4,000 or 5,000 or even, in some cases $10 or $15,000 on a treadmill when I could buy 15 treadmills for the same amount of money? So what if it's cheaper? And that hurts us all in the long run. It used to be the cheaper treadmills were just junk, and they've gotten better over the years. And so if somebody buys $1,000 Horizon machine, for instance, they're not getting an awful experience. And you can put my Siri's talking over here. But you can put in that $1,000 treadmill a lot lower quality parts. And at the end of the day, if you're treated the same way that someone who spent $5,000 on a machine, that value proposition is not clear. And so I think as a manufacturer, it is something they could try out with a certain level. iFit is doing that right now. They've got a Nordic Track machine that they have priced in at $15,000. And that machine should come with almost a white glove level of experience for the customer. The customer shouldn't have to think about service. They shouldn't have to call the same toll-free number that everybody else who buys a $6.99 Proform calls. They should be receiving a much better level of service because they're a completely different customer. Are some of the parts the same that they use in their other machines? Absolutely. I can tell you that from my long-term experience with those guys. But the manufacturers need to take a stance that if I'm going to be charging a premium price, I need to provide that customer with a premium experience. And everybody's cheapened it down to the level that everybody gets the same service no matter what. And that leads to poor customer experiences, and it leads to people putting that question in their mind, well, I can just go for the cheapest one. And it Amazon's everything to where the cheapest price is what I'm going to buy. And so now we are stuck with an industry that the majority of the treadmills that are being sold volume-wise are walking pads. And I'm not sure if most of the ISPs are aware of this, but walking pads don't get serviced. These walking pads are selling on Amazon for $150, $250, $350, and they're absolute junk. I bought several of them, taken them apart, so I know that they're absolute junk. But people are thinking in their mind, well, when this breaks in 6 months, I'll just buy another walking pad for $200, and then I'll use that for 6 months. And so it's ruining the low end of the business because the consumer that buys a $1,000 treadmill is essentially getting treated like the walking pad customer because there's no service there. And the manufacturer has not built in that into the price of the machine to where they can provide that customer with a better service and a better customer experience. And that has to be considered from a manufacturer standpoint. Otherwise, they're going to be commoditized. And so, okay, I've got a machine with a belt here that runs around, and I'll buy that because it's the cheapest price. And that's exactly what has happened. Amazon is selling millions of those walking pads a year. And it's completely taken the guts out of the lower end of the market.
And is that how they can also deal with properly reimbursing an ISP for services rendered?
Exactly. Because if you have a better service provider, and admittedly, if they're dealing with Scott Jennings, they're getting a better level of service than they are with Bubba in his truck and his toolbox who has no idea what a treadmill is. I talked to a guy just about 3 weeks ago. He's the handyman at our church. And he told me, he said, yeah, I tried repairing treadmills for a while, but he said they weren't paying enough for my time. But he was doing warranty calls for I won't mention, but he was doing warranty calls for some of the major equipment suppliers here. But he said the rates weren't high enough to make it worth my time. I was moonlighting that on the side, and he has no idea what a treadmill is or a
Mhm.
bike is, or he doesn't even know the different types of equipment. But he
Yeah.
had a toolbox and he had a truck, and he was willing to accept what the manufacturers gave. And so if he let's call him Charlie. If Charlie's out there doing the service on you, you're going to get a very low level experience. And the factory's going to have to shotgun out those parts to take care of it because he'll just replace all the parts and walk off. And they might get it repaired, they might not. But it'll be a poor quality job. But then if the factory has the money to spend and they build that into the price, and then they can call up Service RX or they can call up any number of other companies that are out there that provide better training that customer has, and the customer receives a good experience. It's a whole different experience than it is from somebody who's having to deal with Charlie.
So, what is your view then on the national service provider conversation that just went around?
Well, I think as long as the national service provider is providing the same level of service, then that's fine. But typically, what happens is when you have a national type of provider that is simply subbing out the jobs to whoever they can find, it's a race to the bottom. It's who can provide the cheapest because then that helps my profit margin. And so I've never seen a national service company do the work at a quality level because they're relying on subcontractors that will underbid each other. A group like NAHFTA that is trying to put together essentially a nationwide service network of small independent business owners who are running legitimate businesses, that's a whole different story. And if NAFTA is able to um, show that value proposition of how they're going to get a better level of service, then I think that's the selling proposition that's out there. It's how do you sell it?
What do you think should be the minimum that an ISP should expect to be paid for the first hour of warranty work? And then what do you think that they should be the minimum that they should expect for that first hour of their own private work? And that includes their travel as well.
Yeah, just knowing today and what expenses are, I think a minimum should be $100 minimum. I really think that probably 120 or 125 is
The
a good
average
minimum.
residential side through iFit currently, depending on who you are and whatnot, is 100 to 125.
Yeah,
Um,
that's very minimum. And
and
that's if somebody's giving me a ton of business. I would say that most people are probably in that 150 to 180
yeah,
range.
that's what I would say. I would think that our whole industry would dramatically start to change if no if, ands, or buts. Every ISP across the nation. Obviously, large cities changed this number, but
Exactly.
all the way down to your most rural places. Your most rural place, no ifs, ands, or buts. This is the place where you can still buy a home for $120,000, right? Um, it's still 120.
Yeah,
The average across the country needs to be 150 and above. And
that's
then
right.
obviously, I would not even know how to consider what a New York would be, or right in the middle of LA or whatever. But I know that you're starting at probably 200, and then you're 110 plus for each additional hour, whatever.
Yeah,
And you take in consideration to your traffics,
that's right.
when you got traffic that's continuously is congested and slows you down from place to place, then your initial trip goes up. So, all right.
Well, yeah.
What uh, how do you feel about artificial intelligence coming, and how do you think it can help us?
Well, AI is coming. To what extent, I really don't know yet. Yeah, and that's not something that I have a lot of experience with personally. I know Jeremy's worked a lot more on it. And so we've actually run one test through FRP using it for customer service. But I think it would be if we could find an AI agent that could handle a lot of scheduling and customer service and things like that for the independent service provider. I think it'd be entirely valuable for them. There's some tools out there you can already do some of that stuff, but a an agent that could provide you with a 24/7 customer support would be extremely valuable to a small business, especially because then there's somebody who's always on call and not necessarily solving every problem. But if you can solve 80% of the problems, you provide the customer with a much better experience, and you also are able to solve a huge number of issues for people no matter what time they contact you.
Hmm. Okay.
And that's where I see the future is more in the agent side than necessarily general intelligence or anything like that. And if you think a robot's going to start fixing treadmills anytime soon, I've got a different story for you.
Yeah.
I think robots will be great on a manufacturing line. I think robots are great in terms of repetitive processes. But if you think they're going to take away the trades, that's the last thing they're going to be taken away.
Yeah. The and yeah, my conversation with John was definitely helped me wrap my head around it a little bit better by just simply stating how many different micro movements we make to arrive at a location and provide services. I do see it, but I do pay attention to the dexterity and the things that they're doing. And I think
Mhm.
at first what we find is a helper, you
That's
know,
right.
coming. But I'm more interested in, the agent style, the how do we get smarter as a tool? How do we use it? I'm really hoping our manufacturing will actually use it to help in call center help
Yeah.
as an assistant um, to these more or less terrible call center techs that
Hmm.
we're talking
Yeah.
um, to find documentation quicker and help them understand and pull things forward and send us the PDFs or whatever that we are asking for to, because this is another thing too that sort of bothers me. The manufacturers forget that a successful ISP works on everything.
That's
And
right.
so we can't retain everything.
That's right.
Others can. There are people that I talk to in this industry that are just a filing cabinet. They can pull things forward because that's how their brain works.
Mhm.
And then there's others that are not. And but that doesn't mean that they're not good service technicians or good
That's
business
right.
owners or
But they
whatever.
need those tools right in their hand when they're on the job to be able to solve unique problems.
It gives them the starting point. Okay, what am I seeing here? Here's the perfect phenomenon. And we service a lot. We've had long time accounts with Orange Theory,
Mhm.
and we have several. And I'm talking to a colleague that's in Texas, and he hits me up today and sends me some pictures of an alarm light that is on the
Mhm.
controller in the bottom that I didn't even know existed. And this
Mhm.
version of treadmill has been around for now the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years. Didn't even know this alarm light was there because no one bothered to tell me.
Yeah.
I wasn't looking for it. Why am I looking for it? Literally, when he sends me the picture, even though they're blurry, and he shows it to me being lit up. I zoom in, I realize even over top of the light, it says alarm. And it is the
Mm.
only light that lights up red. Now I have a new rabbit hole to go down to learn about what this light means.
That's right.
and
But you
and then
should be able
share
to
that.
go to the manufacturer's site, pull it up immediately, and give a detailed explanation of what that trouble light is.
Exactly. And it literally says
Yeah.
alarm. And it didn't exist on the previous iterations.
Yeah.
So, and if it went out in their email drips, well, that's just buried in with a bunch of stuff
That's right.
that we overlook, because you're telling us about. oh, we have a new pulley. We've now switched from the 3.5 to the 4. Well, I don't care that you went from the 3.5 to 4 because when I order it, you're going to send me the 4.
That's right.
Anyhow. Um, all right. Well, what ground haven't we covered? What is the secret sauce of Clark Stevenson, and what's his future look like? Because if I remember correctly, you first and foremost on LinkedIn, you finally posted that you were a founder. After all these years, I'm like going, my gosh, you know. And I think you said, what did you say? It might be a little late, but I finally decided to do this. And I think my response was, you mean forever as a metric?
Yeah.
I mean, what's the future looking like for you? Because I think you've hinted to your stepping away.
No, I'm not stepping away. Actually, just give you a little inside baseball. I was president of Treadmill Doctor,
Uh-huh.
and FRP already had an existing president. And so, in deciding our structure, we had to decide, well, who's going to be president of the overall corporation. And so we made the decision as an ownership group that Keith Johnson, who was president of FRP, is now the president of the entire Treadmill Doctor Corporation. So that was the reason for that change, because I couldn't have president on LinkedIn and have another president who was officially the president. So I just changed it to founder. Actually, my role going forward, we've had a long time CFO in our company, that he's just got to the point with his age that he decided I better hang up my spurs, and so he's closing in on 80, if you can believe it, still working.
You're working them to death, man. How dare you?
No, no, no. He's just decided it's time to step back, and so I'm actually going to be taking over the CFO role starting January 1st.
You're just the young whippersnapper when it comes to
I'm
that
the young
role.
one. I've still got 25, 30 years left, right?
Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, I'm interested. I'm so excited for you guys and for Jeremy and the relationship. He did a great job of keeping it quiet. Literally, there was not a breath when he announced that to us at NAHFTA. We were like, "What? Excuse me?" Like, and he goes, "Yeah," and anyhow, so he can definitely keep a secret.
Yeah, he's the guy you want with all the state secrets because he can keep.
Exactly. He needs to carry the president's football,
That's right. Yeah.
um, you know, and whatnot. But congratulations to you guys. I look forward to one, hopefully seeing you and hanging out a little bit more at HFA this year.
Okay.
Um, and maybe one day I'm stepping back finally and actually going to um, not be in the field.
Okay.
Um,
Great.
I am a I still suffer from adult ADD, and I'm not good in the field. I'm not good in the office, but I'm finally calming down and whatnot. But I hope to maybe do some travel for the business and things like that. So who
That's
knows?
awesome.
Maybe I'll be end up in Memphis uh,
Well,
and
if
whatnot.
you come in 6 months, come to St. Charles. So that'll be where all the major operation will be.
Okay, all right. And St. Charles is closer to
It's a
Jeremy, right?
yeah, it's a suburb of St. Louis.
Yep. Okay. All
Yep.
right. Well, but you won't be there. So,
No,
uh,
I'm still going to be located in Memphis for right now.
yeah. Until you have that retirement home on some island somewhere overlooking.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe the mountains,
Well,
get closer to you over there.
if you're taking on the CFO role, you might just die in the chair.
That's very possible.
You know.
It's getting more
Yeah.
likely every day.
Yep. All right. Well, Clark, thank you for getting up on this early morning and sharing your time with me. I do appreciate it.
Well,
Thank
thank
you
you,
for
Scott.
sharing your knowledge. Um, we look forward to having you around the NAFTA crew as well. You got a breadth of knowledge to share with us all, and I'm glad you're willing to do so. So thank you.
Well, thank you. All righty.